Hello and welcome into the Wheelhouse Basketball podcast on the We Got Balls podcast network. I'm your host, Seamus McNamara. Today is February 27th on a Sunday. I am joined after a week hiatus by my dear friend, Al Biddies Natola. Al, what's going on?
Shay, it's a pleasure to be back, and I'm pumped up because one of the most thrilling 6-minute finishes you'll see in all of Europe happen today to catapult Napoli from third place to first place in Italy's Serie A, and it was incredible. So I'm still jazzed from that huge win in Rome.
You might as well be speaking Italian. I have no clue what you just said, but that's great. I'm very happy for you and your excitement in other sports. Yes, bellissimo. I agree. We're coming to you a week after the All-Star weekend in the NBA and up in Cleveland. Today I wanted to cover just some brief reactions of Friday, Saturday, Sunday night festivities. Probably touch on, now that we are a handful of games past the trade deadline, some new faces and new places, check in with the traded players and their new destinations, see how they've been playing and meshing in their new spots. And then as we close out, we'll try and preview, if you will, where in a future show we'll probably be talking about the upcoming month of basketball in March, where we can really highlight some prospects that we'll be seeing helping us win our brackets or bust our brackets across the board. So let's start it off just with All-Star Weekend. I think in generally, we didn't even do the recap. I got to pull up my phone. and do the recap. I'm all lost here.
Yeah, shaking off that post All-Star rust.
We got some rust going on. Okay.
Much like the Celtics today.
Oh, very rusty. Tough loss to Indiana. That's okay. Things are still looking good. What did they shoot? 75% from three?
Yeah, it was coming off back-to-back. So
okay, since we last talked, here we go. Tyreke Evans has been reinstated to the NBA. Anthony Davis hurt again, out for 4 more weeks. The streaks end for the Boston Celtics before the All-Star game and for the Pistons, win streak and loss streak, vice versa. Anthony Simons, Blazers, they're streaking. Cade Cunningham and Team Barry win the newly formatted Rising Stars Challenge on Friday night. Winners of Saturday night include the Cleveland Cavaliers, Karl Anthony Towns, and Obi Toppin. On the All-Star Day, Sunday, we had lots of talk about LeBron wanting to play with Bronny. Rumblings have begun of him leaving LA. And in the All-Star game itself, Steph hits 16 three-pointers, a record, and LeBron hits an awesome buzzer beater. And fans rejoice as the Elam ending succeeds yet again. Goran Dragic's buyout lands him in the Brooklyn Nets uniform. Funniest headline of the week: De'Aaron Fox frauds NFT fans out of like $2 million. It just plays it off like it was no big deal. I need to read like a million articles about this because it's by far the funniest storyline of the year. The vaccine mandate in New York is likely to loosen. Chris Paul, despite playing in the All-Star game, is injured. Point book has been awesome. Darius Garland, despite playing in the All-Star game, is injured. Their point replacement has not been as good as Devin Booker. Scotty Barnes career high, RJ Barrett career high, and an exciting close. Most recent headline is Markelle Fultz is nearing a return to the court for the Orlando Magic. Although his video where he says he's coming back, it really, I don't know if you've seen this video, it looked like he got stung in the face by like 45 bees. His eyes were like so close to shut, and it wasn't like he was like moked. It was like he was just like infected or something was going wrong. He had an allergic reaction. So I'm concerned for Markelle's health, whether he's allergenic or something like that. But I'm excited to see him on the court. What interested you most before we jump to the All-Star reactions since we've last talked?
That's a very good question, Seamus. And I got to go with our Boston Celtics just to see them close out. I think since we last talked, there was the 50-point whooping of the Philadelphia 76ers. And even though Harden had not quite made his 76ers debut, they still had Embiid on the floor. And it was a win that was not happening back in the year 2021. And I think that's been the general trend of the Celtics since the calendar turned over, is that while we might not be a contender, I think we can back off all that negativity that existed in 2021 that had people questioning if this core could stay together. So that's really what has caught my happiness the most, as well as my attention.
I'll echo those praising thoughts of the Celtics. Obviously, we just said they came off of a loss in Indiana, off a back-to-back where they played yesterday. Weird back-to-back times, a noontime game and then a 4 o'clock game the next day. But those are the only two. I mean, this loss and then the loss right before the All-Star game were the only two losses that they've had in the past 15 games. They've been on fire. Absolutely. They're differentiating themselves from the Toronto Raptors, who are the 7 seed, 2 games back, and they're in shouting distance of home court advantage in the Eastern Conference. And I agree, I wouldn't put them in the same tier as probably the Milwaukee, Philly, and Brooklyn guys, who I think are the most likely teams to be hoisting the Eastern Conference champion trophy when comes year's end. But I think I'm looking at the Celtics the same way I was hoping to be looking at them coming into the year, where if something rolls their way, whether it's injuries or just a lucky stretch in the playoffs, that they could be a team that's there in the Eastern Conference Finals. And that's all you can ask for a team at this stage whose leaders are 23 and 25 years old. But I'm sure we'll be talking the Celtics lots in the coming weeks. So let's give a brief recap. Let's start on Friday night. Did you watch before anything interesting, did you watch the celebrity game? Steve's not here, and he has a lot to say about this, the celebrity game. But did you watch it? I didn't watch the game. Did you watch the celebrity game?
I did not. I saw Myles Garrett be enormous and dunk. Yeah. I saw Machine Gun Kelly look like Machine Gun Kelly.
Okay, skip. Okay, so the Rising Stars Challenge. Do you like the format? 4 new teams. It's kind of like bracket style. They have less players on each team. They do the Elam ending. And then the championship game was only up to 25 points. How did you like the format compared to years past?
I love it because nobody cares enough that this needs to be this stick to the script, a traditional basketball game. I think it's a fun exhibition, and I'm a really big fan of having the G League Ignite guys join the party, because and this is probably a whole podcast in its own right, but I think that the success of G League Ignite is a good thing for the league, and for these guys who don't get the glory of March Madness, they don't get the glory of being the big man on campus out of Kentucky. I think it is a nice reward for those guys that, hey, you get to go be a part of All-Star Weekend. You get to be on the floor for a part of it. You get to play with LaMelo Ball. You might pass LeBron James in the hallway. I think all of that stuff is really cool for those G League players. And yeah, I think that from a structure standpoint, I'm more than happy for all of All-Star Weekend, particularly the Rising Stars Challenge, to be a bit of a testing ground for new ideas.
I thought that Friday was one of the bigger successes of the weekend. I think the format lends itself to a more competitive style with these young players who, in comparison to maybe the All-Star game, I think it's more likely that there's going to be higher effort throughout. Obviously, it's still an exhibition-style game, so you're not going to get 100% of the time. Touching on the G League players, I think it's awesome because it just means it's going to be happening in the future. This year's crop of players that are going to participate in the game, even though I think Scoot could be a player that's going to be in contention for the number 1 pick in the ensuing draft, not this year's draft. He and his teammates are clearly were a little bit over their heads and were more subsidiary players, but that's okay, because in years in the future, we'll be seeing higher level prospects that are going to be coming to the Ignite, a la Cunningham or Jalen Green. Like if those guys were in the festivities last year, I think those would have been much more likely to produce some highlights and be guys that were dunking over people, when these guys were more like support and they make an open layup because they cut. And that was the type of style that they were playing. But Cade Cunningham obviously was the MVP of the night. He was. I thought he was the best player in the entire competition. I think he is the best player in the entire competition. I thought the weirdest part was why Anthony Edwards clearly thought he was above it. I don't know whether he had something that was lingering. He's played since then, but he played the first 30 possessions of the first game, and then he just didn't play again. But I think that's enough for that.
Wait, I did.
Yes.
I did realize something as we were talking through this. Yes. Will Scoot be the first ever 4-time Rising Stars Challenge participant?
Very interesting layer. Just continue to come back again. Can't get enough of the Rising Star Challenge. I think we
might have to go to the fourth one. I know the Celtics are trying to get the 2025 All-Star game, so maybe that might be number 4. So we might have to go see Scoot.
He just loves
presidential term.
Yes, just loves Clorox wipes. Wants to get an infinite supply. Oh boy! All right, so the most hotly talked about and discussed night of the evening of the weekend is typically Saturday night, and it was for the wrong reasons this year. I didn't watch the skills challenge. Did you watch the skills challenge? I know Evan Mobley hit a half court buzzer beater to win it. I didn't watch.
I watched it on replay, and yeah, replace the skills challenge with like 2-on-1.
Yeah, 1-on-1, 2-on-2. We want that real bad. Yeah. Okay, so the things that matter are 3-point and the dunk. I thought the 3-point contest was solid. I feel like it's a very consistent event. You know what you're going to get. Karl-Anthony Towns was an underdog choice, but not a surprising winner. He adds to his hopeful resume to be the best shooting big of all time, self-proclaimed, but there's a lot of stats that can back him up. Right, yeah. So good for him. Do you have any thoughts about the 3-point challenge?
Congrats to Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to the dunk contest. There's a lot of talk about this dunk contest being a lot of overreaction in my eyes. Mm-hmm. This dunk contest being one of the worst dunk contests that they've seen in recent memory. We need to rehaul the dunk contest. We need to put the dunk contest before the 3-point challenge. We need to dump the dunk contest. We need stars to come compete in the dunk contest. I have lots of thoughts about not necessarily the dunk contest needs fixing, but I have lots of thoughts about how to appropriately handle the dunk contest moving forward. But before we talk about that, what did you think of the actual contest itself? Was it as bad as the tabloids would make you think in the days ensuing the event?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of seen the dunk contest so many times that a great dunk feels a little too familiar to us. So the bar is always very high, and the expectations are always very difficult to meet. And yeah, it just like was not the best event. But I also think that in people's minds, like that every dunk contest is Jordan versus Neek, is Vince Carter, is Zach LaVine versus Aaron Gordon. And just the reality of the dunk contest is that you get like a few stinkers in a row, and then 1 year you have a really great one. Everybody says, "Oh, this saved the dunk contest," and then rinse and repeat. So I think it's just the nature of the dunk contest that you get some stinkers, and then every few years you get a really great one with a really great lineup. And so yeah, we're in the dark period of the dunk contest, but I think you keep it as I think you keep everything as is for the dunk contest.
So I think when you're looking at the dunk contest in review, I thought Cole Anthony and JTA were going to be terrible. That lived up to be true. JTA's dunk where he jumped over the guy and did the windmill was solid, but I don't know how many attempts it took him to do that. And Cole Anthony was a lot of hoopla for nothing that impressive. And
you were not impressed by the Timberlands.
No, I don't like. I'm an anti-Cole Anthony guy. I'm excited for Markelle Fultz to come back so he can be diminished to a 6-man role. Jalen Green is obviously the gargantuan disappointment of the contest, and I think it's purely because, and I'll talk about this more, he didn't finish the stupid NFT dunk within the first 2 attempts. And then the second dunk, it's like an incredible dunk, and it's just because everyone had soured on him by that point that it didn't even matter. And I understand it's a dunk that like Dennis Smith did a couple of years ago and that people have done before, but it's still an in between the legs, like 270 reverse dunk, like dunks that weren't humanly thought of being possible before like 6 years ago. That's something he did, and everyone was like, let's give him a 44. Yeah, that's a 44. Whereas like if you go back and watch the 2001 dunk contest, people do a windmill and they get a 50. So I'm disappointed that Jalen Green couldn't complete the first dunk, even though once he finally changed his tone and did a windmill off the glass, he was as high as space finishing that dunk. And if he just started with that dunk, he probably would have been in the final. And I think he probably had something else that was good. So he was a huge disappointment. Obi Toppin's, so right now, Jalen's issues were dunk attempts. Was his issues.
Yes, and so, I think that's one of like the big takeaways from this dunk contest, and like any dunk contest that leaves people underwhelmed, is that there's just like that like the guys shoot 25%.
Right, exactly. So then the winner, Obi Toppin, I think if you go back and watch, like you just do you YouTube it, you watch your 10-minute clip of the dunk contest from the night before. I mean, obviously I watched the actual dunk contest on Saturday night, but if you're watching on Sunday morning and you're just watching Obi's 4 dunks, those are 4 awesome dunks. Like he had an awesome dunk contest. The only thing you can complain about if you're watching on the actual night is a few of them didn't do on the first try, and he didn't dunk it hard. Yeah. That was Obi's issue, because the difficulty of Obi's dunks and the creativity of Obi's dunks and the amount of people that can do Obi's dunks, it's like he was operating at a very, very high caliber. His off the backboard, in between the legs, reverse, fantastic. Jumping over a guy behind the back, fantastic. I mean, he really brought out some impressive dunks. The final dunk, I don't understand why that wasn't regarded as an incredible dunk. He went in between the legs, pinned it off the backboard with one hand, and then dunked it off the backboard after doing it with one hand. That's an awesome dunk. So I think that Obi's performance is being criminally underrated, because I thought he had an awesome dunk contest. And I think the two things that are issues that I think should be focused on both by the NBA and by dunkers moving forward is dunkers need to make sure that they only are doing dunks that they can do within their first 2 or 3 tries. And just to double down on that, the NBA need to change the dunk contest that you only get 3 attempts. You only get 3 attempts. You don't get more than 3 attempts. That's it. In the past, they had struggles figuring out what an attempt was. I don't care what constitutes an attempt. Your hand touches the rim. I don't know. Whatever. You get 3 attempts.
I don't know. I feel like once you jump with the intent.
Well, sometimes you jump and then you pull the ball down. Jalen Green on his second dunk attempt, when he did the reverse 360, he put it between his legs, and then before even doing it, he was like, "No, that wasn't a good one." I feel like I don't know. 3 attempts. I'm saying 3 attempts. You get 3 attempts.
Like the NFL. What's a catch?
Right. And if you're a contestant, make sure you're dunking the ball hard. Like, this clearly matters. It's clearly important. You got to dunk the ball hard. So if you have those things, you don't need to do things like, oh my God, stars need to play. Go look at the list of all-time dunk participants. Stars don't play. Don't just hold the fact that Michael Jordan did it over the entire competition. Michael Jordan isn't the standard. The standard is Aaron Gordon, Zach LaVine. When those guys did it, they were like the 75th best player in the league, like the 90th best player in the league. They weren't the Zach LaVine we know today.
And it's like if Jason Richardson didn't do the dunk contest, then he really would be a forgotten
Jason
figure outside of Golden State.
When he did it, he was like the 46th best player in the league. Like, star power is not what makes the dunk contest great. Incredible dunks is what makes the dunk contest great. And when you have phenomenal dunkers, it's okay. I understand when it's an issue, like when Jeremy Evans wins and he started the season on like a 10-day contract, and 99% of NBA fans probably couldn't tell you that Jeremy Evans in the year that he won the dunk contest, that he even played for the Jazz or whatever team he played for. They probably wouldn't even know what team he played for. And I understand that that's an issue, but even if you go back and watch that dunk contest, like he had a pretty awesome dunk contest. So I think that fans' issues of the nostalgia of thinking previous dunk contests were all perfect, and it being compounded by Kenny Smith and whoever the heck else is commentating just crapping on the dunkers. They're not enjoying themselves. They don't like the players. It's like they don't even like the event. It's like they don't want the event to be good or fun. They're having like a bad time. I don't know what's wrong with them. So it just gets into the head and the mindset of fans who are following it, and they end up thinking that the event was 90 times worse than it was. I thought this dunk contest was fine. I thought it wasn't the best dunk contest I've seen, but if you're holding it to the candle standard of the 2016 LaVine, those are the two best dunkers of all time. So you need to get out of your head that any dunk contest is going to be close to that. And I think it was solid. And I felt bad for Obi Toppin. My takeaway was I felt bad for Obi Toppin because I thought he had an awesome dunk contest.
Maybe add a trampoline round. That's the one change I'll consider. I would love to see a trampoline round.
Somebody's going to get hurt. That's a crazy suggestion. I'm all in.
I mean, if you can, Duncan and Timberlands.
Yuck. I hate it. Okay. Do you have any thoughts about the All-Star game? Do you buy that Chris Paul played in the game so that he could become the all-time All-Star game leader in assists because he got 1 assist and he passed Magic Johnson? Do you think that's why he played?
I thought it was so weird that he was playing. So I guess that I've not heard this theory, but like, yeah, it makes sense that people like Chris Paul, fractured hand, already going to be out, but he is going to play in the All-Star game.
Yeah, Chris Paul's out for the rest of the season. He's going to play with a small cast on his hand. What are you talking about? What is going on?
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess that's the explanation. That's weird.
I thought I mentioned him in the rundown. Steph hitting the threes that third quarter was remarkable. I want to see that in a regular season game. That's really, really fun, really exciting. He probably had 5 look-away threes. Beautiful basketball. And then LeBron hits the buzzer beater in Cleveland. LeBron did a good job at making himself the prominent storyline throughout the course of the entire weekend with interviews, dropping bombs about wanting to go play with his last season is going to be with Bronny. That doesn't mean, folks, that when Bronny gets drafted, that team gets LeBron. It just means his last season that he plays is played with Bronny. People don't understand that picking Bronny means you get LeBron. It just means that LeBron's last season, LeBron's last season is not going to be in 2024. That's when Bronny's going to get drafted. And for anyone who's curious, yes, Bronny's a legitimate prospect. He's not like LaMelo Ball was a prospect when we were talking about LaMelo Ball in his infancy as a high school sophomore. But he's I would put him somewhere between, without being extremely confident of the players that are 20 deep, I would put him somewhere in the 20 pick range, somewhere 20th. He's the 20th best prospect, somewhere around that range in 2024. So that's some interesting talk. But I thought the most exciting part of Sunday was the halftime procession of the NBA Top 75. At a later date, I would love to have discussions about the issues that I have with the list and where I think that they went wrong. But I just thought having all that star power, shame on the people who are capable of making it and didn't make it. Like, shame on those people for not going. But I really thought that seeing so much just NBA mythology showing up in one spot, it really was. It was awesome. It was like awe-striking, when all these players were coming out and you were seeing just the history of the game. Jordan comes out and he gets just as loud of an applause as LeBron does in Cleveland. It was really cool to see. And all of the stuff that leaked out afterwards with just the stars interacting with current players, stars interacting with each other. We heard comments from Shaq about how his idols and the people he was interacting with in the back and how that rubbed off on him. I thought just overall the aura of that event, I think the NBA did a good job of capturing the importance of the NBA and its history and these 75 players, right or wrong, who they acknowledged as the 75. I think they did a good job of highlighting these guys as really being legends.
Yeah, I think it was something that's really special. And I think for the league to have lost a big member of their history in Kobe, it does highlight what it means to have all of these guys in the same place at the same time and knowing that you're not going to get that exact group again. So I think it was just really cool to see. And you get all the photo shoots of like, here are the Celtics legends. Here's like Stockton, Chris Paul, Magic Johnson. So I thought that was just really cool. Kind of reminds me as a baseball fan of the 1999 All-Star game at Fenway when they surprise everybody and bring Ted Williams out, and all of the current players are just like, oh my God, it's Ted Williams. You get kind of that feeling of Michael Jordan just still being the big man on campus and just walking around challenges Magic to a game of 1-on-1 with a dead serious look on his face. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, like, on social media, just every few months, we're just going to see like some of these photos and videos resurfacing, because it is just so unique to have the history of the game in one place.
For sure. So I thought it was a good weekend. I don't have any. Do you have any thoughts about the actual game besides Steph and LeBron?
No, but like, shout out to Steph, because I just love that Steph gets booed in Cleveland, and he gets booed for the best possible reason. Like, that is the dream of an athlete, is just like, yeah, you're booing me because I took banners down from your ceiling. So you better boo me, and I'm going to serve up 50 for you. And then, yeah, LeBron, I mean, gets the buzzer beater in Cleveland. That's awesome. Talks about a whole bunch of other stuff besides the fact that one of his teammates is not very good, and another one of his teammates is not very good at staying on the floor. So yeah, I mean, all in all, I think we touched on it all. But yeah, I love All-Star Weekend.
I'll say, yeah, it's great. It's great for the storylines that come out of it, whether they're legitimate or just poppycock. But it's all fun. It's fun. It serves its purpose well. They do a good job of highlighting the stars in their game. Moving forward and like looking at the game, I think in years past, the game has been used by players to kind of become like a stepping stone moment. Some young players really step their game up to the point where they're clearly belong on the court, and they are here, and they're with these other guys that formerly you wouldn't think they would be with. And I didn't really see that this year. I was kind of hoping that like Luka would go off, but he seems pretty apathetic to the whole thing about playing hard whatsoever. He kind of just likes goofing around. But so maybe moving forward, and that waxes and wanes from year to year, depending on what you're going to get from the players that are participating in the game. But let's jump to some not like trade reactions, but let's touch on some players, some new faces and new places. The biggest one is obviously we only can talk about 50% of it. Ben Simmons has not yet played. We're hearing lots of weird rumors about now he's got a back injury. Who knows? Some people think he's not going to play again for this season, something that you guessed at, which would be pretty funny.
We've already gotten the first Ben Simmons is in the gym video.
With Kyle Korver.
He was splashing from 2 feet out. If he just did that in Atlanta, then we would have avoided the whole thing.
That's a great point. Yeah, that highlight film was showing things. He was working on his game. That part of his game was important. Good point. Yeah, so from the Nets side, it's hard to take anything away. Drummond has been a surprisingly important presence for them as a rebounder, ability that team severely lacked. And I understand it was only one game, but they played the ABC Saturday night game was against the Bucks. The Nets squeaked it out. Kyrie had an incredible game, and Drummond had some nice clutch time stops. He's not known as a defensive stopper, but he played well, and he walled up against Giannis. So I think it's interesting to see how those pieces will fit together. I think if they can get their full cast of characters, they are obviously a legitimate contender. But the more interesting side, and something that we can actually draw a little bit from, is the Philadelphia 76ers. Their newfound star in James Harden has now played 2 games. He played a game 2 nights ago against the Minnesota Timberwolves in a W. I think it was a blowout win for most of the game. And then he played earlier today, also in a blowout W over the New York Knicks. Harden was incredible in both games. I think he had 27, 8, and 12. And then today, he had 29, 10, and 16. Just watching him, he provides an amount of spacing and motivated player movement that something that the Sixers have never really had before. All of the detractors thinking that the fit between him and Embiid wasn't going to be smooth or was going to take some time to really be oiled. They are scratching their heads because Embiid looks incredible with Harden. He's rolling hard to the rim. Their chemistry has been awesome up and down the court. And my questions for them are going to be defensively, and similarly to how when we talked last time we spoke, we said the Sacramento Kings going up against the Minnesota Timberwolves. It was like kind of a best case scenario for Sabonis's first game. Very similar reaction to watching them play against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and even more doubling down against the New York Knicks. These teams were lost defensively, and I understand that they're superstar caliber players, but they didn't have a shot. They weren't playing a lick of defense against Embiid and Harden, but offensively the flow was there, and they looked to be in rhythm. Harden looked to be in shape. He unzipped his fat suit. So I'm as a Celtics fan, I'm concerned about how well they look like they're fitting offensively, and I'm hoping that defensively is where the relying on Matisse Thybulle and Joel Embiid to carry the entire ship of the Philadelphia 76ers. Hopefully that'll wear too thin, because otherwise this looks really, really potent. I know you haven't had the chance to watch today's game yet, but if you saw any highlights or anything from the Minnesota game, what have you thought so far of Harden's fit in Philly?
I mean, the stats speak for themselves that it's going well and they can play together. I think it's nothing. It's not news that James Harden can throw up 30 and 10 every night. He's done it. But what's going to happen come playoff time? We're talking James Harden. We're talking Doc Rivers, and even a little bit of Joel Embiid. Like, there's a lot of playoff skeletons there that, whatever we see in the regular season, I'm still going to need some more convincing that they've got what it takes to get over a Milwaukee who's raised the trophy, or a Miami who has gone to the finals and brought in Kyle Lowry who's raised the trophy.
I hear you. It's interesting to give Doc some credit in these two games. He's actually done something he wasn't prone to do in the past, which is stagger his stars. So we saw lots of minutes, which is funny. It's stupid to say, but
yeah.
He played Harden with a bench lineup that was like Georges Niang, Danny Green, Furkan Korkmaz, and Paul Millsap. And that lineup looked really good. It has enough spacing surrounded Harden, and it lets him be able to have some more space in the paint. Whereas with Embiid, it's a lot more pick and roll. And it's a lot more movement. Harden is playing off. I thought Maxey, underrated part of the acquisition, is the amount of space that is being freed up for Tyrese Maxey to operate in places where formerly he was trying to get himself out of jail. Now he's seeing daylight unlike anything he's seen so far in his career. So I think it's going to work wonders for Maxey. Just the fit between their top three players in Harden, Maxey, and Embiid has looked awesome. I don't think Tobias Harris is very good, and his contract is obviously deplorable, but just the open looks that he's gotten so far, his catch and shoot numbers, I think they've been terrible in the two games just because, again, he's not that great. But the theory of Tobias Harris as a player should be maximized, along those three guys. And then having the fifth piece that matters most being one of the 10 best defenders in the league in Matisse Thybulle, the recipe makes sense, So
yeah.
My questions are defensively, and in that it wasn't until the second half where they actually started to look a little bit more cohesive, and it could just be early growing pains. But in that first half against Minnesota, Matisse was needing to make up for too many mistakes around the perimeter. Embiid, when he was pulled away from the rim, the team was able to take advantage of the weak side of the defense. So I think there's a lot to look at. I don't really trust their bench at all. I mean, they didn't sacrifice a ton of depth, but they obviously sacrificed some depth. Yeah. Say what you want about the players that they shipped out in the deal. So you're 1,000% right. Right now, that they look incredible playing against two craft barrel teams in the first two, but those are where you want to really start your momentum with a new acquisition. It's good to get those things under your belt to feel good about stuff, and hopefully as the season ramps up coming to the playoffs, they can get some more imposing opponents behind them as W's as well. So it should be interesting to see. I still think I favor the Bucks and the Nets at full health over the Sixers, but I think that they deserve to be in that top tier of Eastern Conference contenders. Are you looking at it differently since seeing in brief minutes Harden's arrival, or you saw kind of what you were thinking you were going to be processing the Sixers as coming in after the trade?
Yeah, I mean, I think they got to be in the upper echelon. I might even have them over Brooklyn because I don't know if
We don't know.
I don't know if Ben Simmons can play in Philly. He seems to not want to. So
I just want him to play, dude. He's got to play. I don't understand. He looks. I mean, I
he's a
can't.
basketball player. So
we think, and I mean the headlines that are released by the New York mayor on the day. I mean, in the morning you could think, hey, today's the day that Kyrie Irving's going to be allowed to play, but then more details are released that it's not going to allow players are not going to be exempt from different rules, and they're going to be held to a different standard. And Kyrie can now go to the games as a spectator, but can't play in the games as a player. So there's still a lot of finagling along the fringes of legality, or for whatever the limitations are and sanctions are, that I believe, and I've believed it long, that either Kyrie is going to take some stupid fake vaccine, or that the restrictions are going to change come playoff time. It's just, and it's funny if you listen to any of the Nets beat reporters talk about the team and what buzzwords are swirling since the deadline acquisition. I can't tell you how many times Steve Nash has said ramp up, like the ramp up, and it's like really they're really stressing the ramp up for the playoffs, and it's just like the smallest ramp of all time. They have no time. They have no time, and they don't have the ability to ramp up without their best player healthy, without their second best player being capable of playing NBA games because of his vaccination thoughts, and without their third best player, who knows what's going on with Ben Simmons. So this team is purely theoretical, and I hope they get some games under the belt, because I think they can be really, really exciting and a good basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 21 left, and it's not the situation like last year where, you know, when they brought in Harden was a top 10 player, and that's just not Ben Simmons. Even if you think he fits better, it's a different story. Let's talk another.
You want to go next?
New face, Tyrese Halliburton.
Yes.
I was the most like, what are the Kings thinking? When we did the Deal Zone podcast, and the wins are hard to come by in Indiana right now, once they're playing the Celtics, but he's put up some incredible stat lines. He did 22 and 16 against Minnesota. If you just get traded, go ahead, play Minnesota. You'll do great.
Minnesota's getting every new acquisition is putting in Minnesota.
Yeah, it's the ramp up. And then, so it's actually 21-16, 5 rebounds. Played Washington, 21-14, 6 rebounds. And then today against the Celtics, he had 22 points, 9 rebounds. So, I mean, he's just playing really well. And it's just like, oh my God, this guy's 21 years old, and this is how he's responding to really the first adversity in his pro career. I love it. And I think that the Kings made a mistake still.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's looked like he's flashed more star potential than not necessarily I thought he had, but he looks like he could be more of a primary rather than more of a connecting player, where I thought he was going to be like one of the best role players in the league. Like he could be perennially the 30th best player in the league, and he's like, you want him on your team because he's a winning player. He's looking like he has lead ball handler chops, incredible vision and passing ability. He's averaging in the 6 games, he's averaging like 20 points, 5 rebounds, 11 assists. He's shooting 50, 44, and 78% on reasonable volume. He's playing more minutes. His usage is up. So what we're seeing, and it's an interesting dichotomy between the two headlining players in this trade versus Halliburton and Sabonis. Halliburton has come to this team. He's been given a growth of role, and he's stepping into it brilliantly. And he's not necessarily changing his game, but he's operating at a higher level, doing things he wasn't given the opportunity in the previous stop, and proving that he can be a player that we weren't seeing in 100% light back in Sacramento, where versus the other way around, Sabonis, he's just the same exact player that he was in Indiana. It's more about how that same exact player is impacting Sacramento. And we're seeing this team, they're moving a lot better. Their offense is much more well spaced. Their team just makes more sense, and the vibes are better. So it's an interesting comparison where neither team is going to fix the other. Their new location's woes. Sacramento has a shot to be a play-in team. Maybe Sabonis will give them the boost to be that team. And on Halliburton's side, the Pacers are going to be terrible. Like they're going to be one of the 5 or 6 worst teams in the league, and they're hoping for the best pick that they can possibly get in this upcoming draft. But it's purely about giving Halliburton the runway to be the best possible player that he can be, and so far he's grasped that opportunity really by the balls, and he's been incredible. So I love what I've seen out of him. Defensively, he's got a lot to polish up, but he has good tools on that end too. So I like Halliburton, and I think if they are landing, and we'll talk about these guys in a little while, if they are landing a Paulo, a Chet, a Jabari, any of these, even if they're landing Jaden Ivey because they don't get as high as a draft slot, I think all of those guys. I don't think Shaedon Sharp's going to be there. AJ Griffin, any player that I'm seeing on the top 6 of the draft board, if they end up in Indiana, I think it's going to fit really well because Halliburton, in my eyes, fits with almost anyone. So obviously the Kings made a mistake. They gave up too much value in return for an average player in Domantas Sabonis, but they have, for whatever imperative reason, they have a drive to make the playoffs this year, and maybe they'll do that as a 10 seed. We don't even know. What about CJ McCollum? Have you watched any Pelicans games since CJ McCollum's? Because Damian Lillard has watched every Pelicans game since CJ McCollum has landed in New Orleans.
I have not. I've kind of heard about the old soap opera that we get so much of in the league, but no, I have not been able to watch.
Yeah, speaking on the soap opera, in an interview All-Star Weekend, good for lots of headlines, CJ McCollum said that Zion and him hadn't spoken, even though he had been there for almost 5 days already, which was pretty funny. Since then, they've obviously spoken. Zion's got a lot going on with his recovery, and oh my God, is Zion a full episode's worth of discussion to talk about in himself? But oh my God, did you see at Mardi Gras? Did you see the float that they made for Zion?
No, I did not.
Oh boy, they did Zion dirty. They made Zion real plump. They called him 1 ton. They called him 1 ton. It said 1 ton on his jersey, not Zion. It said 1 ton. So they might be forcing him out, which is tough. But CJ has been awesome. He's been incredibly efficient. He's been like almost a 50, 40, 90 guy. He's averaging 29, 6, and 5. He's been a great scoring fit alongside of Ingram. The pairing of him and Herb Jones looks really, really good. When he plays backcourt minutes with anybody that isn't Herb Jones, who's more so a 3, it looks bad just because there's no defense whatsoever. But I think he was a good infusion of talent for a roster that really needed some backcourt help. But I even forget who. What about the other side? Have you watched any Portland Trailblazers basketball? Josh Hart and those guys.
I've watched a little, and it's been very, very strange that this team that's looking to lose games is all of a sudden not doing that, and they had to send Yusuf Nurkic to fake injury list just to tank their way out of the play-in here. But yeah, I mean, I think it's super cool to see some young guys taking a step up while they have the opportunity, and good for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that I said it earlier that Anthony Simon's Blazers have been streaking. I mean, leading up to the deadline on February 1st, they got a win against Detroit. And then after that, they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They won 8 straight games. And they just lost. They got absolutely obliterated. They got housed by Golden State. But they're 8-1 in their last 9 games. Obviously, Simons is the leading responsible member there, and he's been awesome. I would love to touch on him and his improvements in a new episodes at some point. But Josh Hart he's been good. He's been a two-way player. He got over 20 points in 3 of his 4 games that he's played so far. He's shooting the ball a lot. He's playing a lot of minutes. Typically, he's a fantastic defender. His defense hasn't been awesome in these games, but maybe it's just because he has a newfound offensive role. But I like what I see out of him. And this team, I don't know. I don't know what to take away from a 8-1 stretch for a team that wants to get a better pick. But they're going to be getting whatever New Orleans picks is, and they're probably going to be trying to retool quick in the offseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if, depending on what's on the market for them, if they were trying to land a bigger player in trade, and guys like Simons or Hart were actually shipped out of there with a draft pick alongside them, so that they could grab who knows what, a sign and trade to get DeAndre Ayton. I have no clue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be who's the next star that we can bring in that we can either sign in free agency because they have lots of cap flexibility, or who can we, I don't know, draft and trade away some young players so we can really flip this, what right now looks like a bad rebuild. But you got to love Simons. You got to like what you've seen from Hart so far. The other players that they acquired haven't really done much of anything. But is there anybody else you want to touch on before we start talking about some prospects? What about Derek White? What do you think of Derek White so far?
Love Derek White. Totally understand the fit. And yeah, I mean, I when your 2 best players are wings, it just makes sense that you should be investing elsewhere. You're all set with Rob Williams down low. So yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense that they went out, got this guard, plays a lot like Marcus Smart in certain ways, and doesn't play like Marcus Smart in other certain important ways, like is a little bit more willing to keep the ball moving, and that sort of quality is contagious. And I'm happy to have him, and yeah, I'm happy with the look of the roster.
I think the Celtics' offensive flow, I don't want to attribute it 100% to Derek White, but their offensive flow since the acquisition in these 6 games has been beautiful basketball. I mean, they're moving the ball on the perimeter. When there's a crease in the defense, they're attacking the closeouts with the right speed. They're finding the open man. They're cutting to the rim. They're filling holes in the defense with players in the right spots. And I think that Derek White really motivates a lot of that. His stats are down across the board, but that's purely because he had a bigger role in San Antonio. His shooting has not come around yet. I'm confident that it'll start to fall. We see him being able to shoot. I think he's over 45% from the corners so far with the Celtics. That's an awesome shot that I trust him to be able to hit. He pulled a couple above the break threes in our win against Detroit that were exciting shots. I just think he's an awesome fit. That's a defensive menace who's a perfect player for this roster, and he's going to show out in the playoffs. I'm trying to think about it. I mean, across the league, Marvin Bagley had an exciting game, couple nice alley-oops from Cade. That's the type of flyer that Detroit should absolutely be doing. Kristaps hasn't played. Bertans and Dinwiddie looked okay in a game against Utah. I'm trying to think about the other trades. What other trades were there? I feel like we touched on most of them.
There are many, but I think we got the big ones.
Okay, so let's jump. March is, how many days are there in February? 28?
28.
March is 2 days away. We're going to have conference tournaments starting probably at the end of next week. This draft, I talked about how it wasn't comparative to previous drafts. It's not anything to write home about, but there's going to be some really solid players that you can get. I don't think there's any tier 1 players, but there's probably 3, maybe 4 tier 2 players. So coming up, they're all going to be participating in the tournament because Gonzaga, Auburn, Duke, Purdue are all pretty strong teams, and that's where our top 5 prospects are coming from, depending on how you feel about certain players. So of the top 3, I listened to a podcast with Sam Vecini, who's one of the better draft guys, he did a mock draft with one of his frequent guests. And that was the first time that I had heard anyone have Paolo or any one of Chet, Jabari, or Paolo not in the top three. They put Jaden Ivey. They picked Jaden Ivey at 3 over Paolo. It's pretty cemented for me that it's Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero in some order. The same thing as last time that we talked. Depending on the day, I switch up the order of those guys. But those are my top 3. And then I have in a separate tier below them, I have Jaden Ivey and AJ Griffin, who's really started to come onto the scene recently, Paulo's teammate on Duke. So out of those 5 guys, or maybe that top 3, are you seeing those same 3 guys in the top tier? Do you agree with someone like Vicini that maybe Ivy is actually creeping into that discussion of being a top 3 pick? And just overall, what are you excited to see from the prospects that we have coming forward for March, the biggest month in college basketball?
Yeah, last time we talked about prospects, I was definitely a bit colder on Chet Holmgren than you were. And since then, he's really just been proving me wrong and has been arguably the best player in all of college basketball. So I think that's really cool to see. And you had called it out during that original conversation. And it's really been borne out in play that Chet really is a competitor. And I think that's going to serve him well because he's just going to understand the role that he needs to play. So awesome to see Chet. Part of me still worries just about his body because on the one end, he does need to put on some weight. And then on the other end, it's just like there's this sort of tension that's just like, listen, he's a huge guy. And I think the easiest comparison that you can really make for him is a Kristaps Porzingis. And look at how Kristaps Porzingis' career went, where early on, so much hope, so much, oh my God, the 7'2" guy has guard skill. And now he's one of the worst contracts in the league. So I think there is that worry compared to a Jabari Smith, who is just really, really tailored to the modern game as a 4. And then with you mentioned Jaden Ivey creeping in over Paolo. I mean, I definitely don't do enough draft research to make the call one way or the other, but I know that one of Paolo's knocks is just ability to impact the game when it's not a big scoring night for him. And I know that for Ivey, he's just an explosive guard, and maybe him having his season while Ja Morant is the hot topic in the NBA, maybe that's going to take him up the draft board. So I think in a draft like this, where there is no superstar, you got to go with the guy who's going to fill a role really well. And I think you don't want to compare any draft to 2013 because it was so bad, but it's just like the Cavs could have just taken Victor Oladipo, who was the best college player that year, and that would have worked out much better than Anthony Bennett. So with that in mind, Holmgren has kind of become my top guy, where it's like, okay, there's no blue chip, no doubt prospect. So let's go with this guy who can play the 5 and stretch the floor at the very least. And I do see a lot of potential for that defense to carry over. And let's just cross our fingers and hold our breath on the body holding up.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely. I think Chet is like, again, I said it, that it changes depending on what I had for breakfast that day. But right now, I have Chet 1. I think that I had Paolo 1 the last time we talked, maybe a month ago. But since January, not including the game where Gonzaga just lost to St. Mary's, it was their first loss in a very long time. Gonzaga is going to be a strong seed in the tournament. Chet had a tough game, foul trouble against St. Mary's, didn't play well. But in the 12 games before that, he was averaging 16 and 12, a steal a game, almost 4 blocks a game. He's shooting 63% from the field, 51% from 3 on 4 attempts a game, and 81% from the free throw line on over 3 attempts a game. And it's not a a change necessarily from the first portion of the season where, and I don't want to use the word theoretical with his style of play, but offensively, there's been a new fluidity and aggressiveness to his play where he's imposing himself as a scorer, where previously he was kind of more of, I'm going to do all of the right things for my team, and I'm going to be a rim protector here. I'm going to be a ball mover here. He's a really good decision maker. So what I've seen recently from Paulo is his ability, not Paulo, from Chet is maybe his ability to take a bigger load offensively than I was expecting him to. And that really excites me because I still think his biggest strength for an NBA team is as an elite rim protector, as an elite backline defender who's a really, really intense player. So that archetype of player it's kind of hard to lay up against any current NBA player. I mean, it's essentially like Kristaps and Miles Turner, like the scrawny shooter that is also a fantastic rim protector. There's not a lot of those. So every time we get a new one coming in, it's a new set of data points to build for a future comp for a similar guy. He's dominated at every level, and he's always had a skinny frame where he was going up against people who are wider and stronger than him, and it hasn't really been an issue. So I kind of just trust that it's going to work. Again, I don't think he's probably going to be one of the 15 to 20 best players in the league one day, but I just see it. I just see it going right, and see the things that he brings to the table being more likely to be consistently valuable than whatever it is that Paulo or Jabari does when it's right. And to touch on those other guys, a lot of people have Paulo in the top tier, or a lot of people have Jabari in the top tier, and Paulo people are cooling on. And I do think it's because of what you said, where if Paulo is having a cold night offensively, he's pretty quiet. There's been a lot of ESPN games where Duke's playing not premier talent teams, but they're playing headlining games, whether it's against North Carolina or whatever it is, and he does kind of dissipate from the game, and you don't notice him as much. But in the last 4 or 5 games, where, and again, I'm not going crazy with my college film. I watch condensed games for most of my prospects, unless it's up against a big game where I'll watch the full game. And in recent film that I've watched, he's showing more of that ball moving skills, those vision, the ability to make the right play on the fast break that he showed in high school, where we weren't seeing that at all early in the season. So I'm excited that we're seeing other layers of his game that I thought were there, and he's brushing off. And it could be because players that he's being surrounded by are being more and more effective. The big man, Mark Williams, he's probably going to be a first-round guy. And another guy, AJ Griffin, that I would love to touch on in a few seconds. He's really, really shown out recently. So I think that Duke is probably the most watchable. I'm probably going to watch the most Duke games of any team in the tournament, purely because, I mean, Trevor Keels is their 4th best player, and he's going to be a top 29. He's going to get picked somewhere between 25 and 30. So they could have 4, maybe 5 first-round picks, and there's a lot of interesting players there. I can't. You said something interesting. We're saying just kind of the allure and the hype of Ja Morant. Maybe that like visual similarity that he has as an explosive guard with similar hairstyle and similar swagger. That is really making Jaden Ivey pop in the scene. I mean, Purdue's really, really good. Like, Purdue's one of the better teams in the country, and they're probably going to be a top 2 or 3 seed, maybe a top 1 seed. But he's very different from Ja in that Ja is pretty obviously, and he was all the way back at Murray State. He's pretty obviously a 1, like pretty obviously a point. You want him running your offense. He's an incredible creator, awesome passer. To me, Jaden Ivey's like pretty clearly a 2, and he has like some passing credence, but like not that much. And like, I don't love him as a vision, or I don't love his vision or his decision-making ability. And to me, he's more like exciting, gadget, explosive guy that's like not a good defender and is going to be like an okay shooter And you said a name earlier, talking about the 2013 class with Victor Oladipo. And it's not that I think that that's a better comp for him than Ja, but it's like if you're putting those two on a spectrum, I think he's a lot closer to someone like Victor Oladipo, whose athleticism, scoring, and just like is a moxie guy rather than a lead guard creator like Ja.
Yeah.
I think Jaden Ivey might be a little bit closer to Oladipo than people are realizing, and he's good. I mean, he's just a little bit older. He's a sophomore. I just don't trust. I mean, he's my number 4 player, so I mean he's good, but I just don't trust him to be a next like high caliber level player the same way that I think those top 3 are. What have you seen from Ivy at all? And I mean, Purdue is. I mean, I'm going to want to watch every single Purdue game come the tournament because he's electric. I mean, he's an awesome player. He puts people on posters. He's a highlight machine. I don't know. Do you think he has the ability, if things shake out right, to be the best player in this draft? Because some people do.
Yeah, I mean, he looks great. I love an athletic guard. He's a little bit older, but he's a sophomore. Like John Morant was a sophomore, and nobody cares about it now. So all you have to do is go out there and be great. And similar to Evan Mobley last year, which are very different players. So stay with me on this, but very similar, where it's just like, oh my God, can we get this guy out of this college half-court offense? Like, I really want to see him play in more space and have that freedom to make the most out of his athleticism in a more free-flowing environment.
I agree with that for sure.
But you said Duke most watchable team. Just want to plug this to the listeners. I believe it's Saturday, Coach K's last game at Cameron Indoor Arena, Duke versus Carolina. That's, for any basketball fan, that's just like a history one that should be appointment viewing.
For sure. I'll be watching that. Is there another player that we can close out on that has caught your eye outside of those? I think those 4 names are pretty locked as the top 4 guys. Like I said, I have the top 3 as the top 3. And then my guy who I'd like to touch on is I have in a tier with Ivy. But is there anyone else you've seen at all? A lot of sites love Johnny Davis, guard out of Wisconsin. He's good decision maker, strong competitor. He's kind of like a good at everything, master of none type player. People love him. So is there a guy that stands off the page that you're excited about and you're higher on? Because outside of like 6 guys at this point in my scouting, they might as well be question marks,
I mean, I'm still trying to understand the Sharp situation.
Oh no, don't even bother trying to understand.
That's the whole podcast. Okay. Then no, let's talk Griffin then.
Okay. I really like AJ Griffin. I mean, he's like a chiseled Adonis body style, and he's the two-way type wing that NBA evaluators salivate over. His skills on both sides of the ball, a player at his size where he's 6'6", 6'7", he's already 230. He's got an NBA body today. And he's not necessarily, I mean, he does have vertical pop, but I wouldn't describe him as like an above the rim crazy athlete in the same ilk as a Jalen Green or players that we saw in last year's class. But he's a really, really good horizontal athlete. And he's got crazy burst, which is really, really exciting because he's coming off of a leg injury. For me, AJ Griffin is a player that right now I have 5, but I wouldn't be surprised if, depending how he closes out this year, if I moved him above Ivy. He is the youngest player of these 5 players: Chet, Jabari, Paulo, Ivy. He's younger than all of them, and he is. Maybe I'm not sure. Like I don't want to say it confidently yet because his shot is like okay. It's just his form, shooting wise, like number wise, he's incredible. Like the claim that I'm hesitant to make is that he's the best shooter in the draft, and it's purely because his stance is like he's a batter in a batter's box. Like he's got his feet more than shoulder widths apart. It looks real wacky, he can get it off in a variety of ways, coming off of screens. Paulo is drawing a lot of attention, obviously, so he's getting a lot of open looks. But he's really, really a knockdown shooter. His numbers this season, he's really, really efficient. I can't see him not being a high level shooter at the next level. And like I think I want to double check, because earlier in the year he was shooting 50% from three on like 5 attempts a game. So he's dipped below 50%. He's shooting 49% from three right now, and it's on reasonable volume. He's not scoring a ton, and he doesn't do a ton else that's going to like fill up the box score. But I just see him panning out to be a really, really successful player. His defense is more theoretical than his offense right now. And I just think that on this team, he's maybe being overshadowed by the more star caliber guy in Paulo. But he's really beginning to show himself out more and more as the season progresses as a knockdown shooter with an elite NBA body. So just that alone, just in a box, the elevator pitch of elite shooter, NBA body, that should be all you want to be a top 5 pick. And I have him, he's either my 4 or 5. Right now I have him 5. He could definitely go higher than that, but I don't know. What have you seen from him so far?
Yeah, I mean, I know that the comparison that some people have thrown out is a Jaylen Brown, who back at Cal was in a similar situation where it's just like, okay, this guy looks like an NBA player, can go get out on an NBA court right now, doesn't need to undergo the plus 20 pounds of muscle training. Like he's just ready. So I mean, I love that. And I mean, it's a shooting league. If you can shoot and switch, then you're a very valuable piece to any team. So at 6'6", especially if he can guard low, like at 6'6" in built, he's got that potential where he can go 2 to 4, 1 to 4, and really be a Swiss Army knife. So I know you said it's theoretical, and if he lands in the right situation, if he's a running mate for Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana, then
that's a great fit.
I think that he could really make a splash.
I mean, looking at all of the, Orlando, Detroit, Houston, OKC, and Indiana. Those are the top 5 teams right there. It's funny because none of these rosters, maybe Orlando doesn't need any more guards, but like none of these rosters are really going to be upset with any of these 5 guys, depending on who they get. I also have seen the Jaylen Brown comps. To me, as prospects, those don't bore out as true. I thought Jaylen was much more of a vertical pop athlete who also had the horizontal athlete. Jaylen was a much better, much higher caliber athlete than AJ Griffin is. Jaylen is also, he ground his teeth defensively in a way that I haven't seen from AJ Griffin yet. Like he was a legitimate defensive prospect. And Jaylen's shot was very, very theoretical at the point in California. And that was something that he developed. So when I'm thinking about AJ Griffin, I'm comparing him up to guys like OG Anunoby and Lou Dort, guys who obviously their calling card is defense right now, but those guys are good shooters who don't have, I don't want to say they don't have a lot of versatility to their offensive game, but that their shot creation isn't top tier, but it's dependable. And if you watch some of AJ Griffin's game when he gets to the middle of the defense, when he gets around his guy, he has an in-between game that's solid. Visually, it actually is very reminiscent of Jimmy Butler. So I've maybe seen, or maybe I'm just making that up myself, that comp could make some sense to me too. So I really like him. And like I said, Duke is going to be the team I watch because they are going to have 2 top, 6 picks if you are in love with Johnny Davis, because he's the other guy that I've really heard be a top 5 guy. I just see Johnny Davis being more like a Chris Duarte. I just don't, I don't know. Like I'm not confident things are going to translate as well. He doesn't pop off the page in any aspect, but he's a solid player. But college basketball this is obviously the time of the year for college basketball to matter. Up to this point, the only times I'm ever watching college basketball is if I'm watching one of these guys. So I'm sure that there's going to be guys that'll pop on the scene. We haven't really touched on, or I haven't even really watched much of, besides just film work and condensed individual work of like Ty Washington in Kentucky, So there's a lot to look forward to. Closing thoughts on the prospects, and then let's skedaddle.
Yeah, I'll watch a lot more in March, and then really get into the video a couple weeks before the draft. So I'll hold comment until then.
What's your 1, 2, 3 right now for the top guys?
Let's go Chet, Jabari, and I'll stay loyal to Paolo because he's Italian. Number 3.
I feel like I need to watch, because I definitely have watched the most of Chet and Paolo. I need to watch more Jabari. Not that I haven't watched a good amount of him, but Chet's definitely one. That's all. He's my one right now. I think I'm going to keep with Paolo too, but I don't feel confident about it. But with that said,
it seems like he might be like just a little bit, because if neither one of these guys is like a number 1 scoring option, Jabari seems to be a little bit better suited to be like just a catch and shoot. I'm an asset to the offense guy.
Right.
Whereas like,
that makes me nervous.
Might have a learning curve of like,
if Paolo's not a star.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. If he's not a star, he might be more detrimental to your team than Jabari. If he's not a star, he has a higher ceiling as an elite role player. But
yeah,
I agree. I'm with you. But with that said, we've gone on long enough rambling here. Biddies, it was great talking hoops.
As always.
Let's chat again soon. Yes.
And even a little baseball.
Wow, look at us hitting all the sports that I could care less about. Listeners, please rate, review, subscribe, do all the things that you're supposed to do with podcasts. Seamus McNamara and Biddies. We Got Balls Podcast Network. My Wheelhouse Podcast. Adios.